Hello, I'm Clayton Burch, State Superintendent of Schools. As many of you know, each and every month we highlight a superintendent, a spotlight on a superintendent. And for November, we've got another great leader to spotlight. It's Gary Hough from Fayette County. Gary, welcome.
Thank you, Clayton. Thank you for having me today.
You know, Gary, we've been talking to superintendents throughout the year. We talk to them each and every month. We highlight them. And it's, of course, we're going to talk about COVID and the pandemic and how Fayette County's dealt with it. But, you bring an interesting perspective to this month's video, and that is Fayette County has done so much in the last several years around facilities. And I want to talk a little bit today about the power that facilities have on students, on the community, and on your educators. So, for the audience, could you give us a little overview of Fayette County? How many schools and students are really in Fayette County?
Well, you talk about what's happened to Fayette County. In 2014, we found ourselves in a total mess. We had to shut down buildings. We had to move students around. We had students from Collins Middle at the time in 3 locations and dealt with really pretty much disaster with our facilities. At that time, we had about 18 facilities. Right now, we're sitting with 13, and we anticipate maybe within the next couple of years being down to 10. It makes it much easier to maintain those facilities. We have 3 high schools, Oak Hill High, Midland Trail High, and Meadowbridge. A couple of those have different combinations. Of course, Midland Trail is a 612 and Meadowbridge is a 712. But very shortly, Meadowbridge will become a Meadowbridge Regional School, which will be a K-12. So it makes a big difference. We're in the first stages of construction. We hope to break ground the 1st of December on that project, thanks to the SBA and the support of the West Virginia Department of Education and our local board and our staffs of both your department and my staff at the office. We've been very, very fortunate to be able to reduce that. Right now we're sitting with 2 of our schools are what are considered, they're PK8s, and then we have a true middle school, and now which is Oak Hill Middle, which replaced Collins Middle, and then we have 6 elementaries. And what will happen in this grouping, if everything goes right, about 3 of those will disappear, and one will become a new one, and the other one will be closed.
Gary, in order to do that, you brought up several things in that opening there. You've had to make some really tough decisions as a superintendent, and in order to do that, it's been important to Fayette County, even your predecessor, Terry George.
Terry, I was Terry's associate superintendent, and he did a tremendous job of leading us through that process. And shortly after Terry got there, I became his associate superintendent, and he came up with these ideas, and I will openly admit we had been in a pattern where we had done the same thing over and over and over again. And sometimes we have to think outside that box. And the first couple of times Terry brought up those suggestions, I questioned his sanity in terms of approaching those tasks. But what a great model he was for me, even as I took over, and what a great friend he has been over the years.
Well, you both have had to work with your local board, your community, your educators. When you're in a position and you have schools that, we all want the best schools for our children. We want the best schools for our communities. How tough is it as a superintendent to have to go through that process and really consider closing down some of those traditional small schools to sometimes do the consolidation?
Well, this upcoming week, the school we're closing down, at one time I was a principal there. And the community knows me. It is a difficult thing. I don't think any superintendent gets any pleasure out of affecting people's lives and their communities and where we find ourselves at. But one of the key elements we have to remember is really our role is for the children. Sometimes it's tradition that gets you caught up in that battle and where things are at. But we have to remember it is for our children, to give them the best opportunities possible, to give them the best facilities possible, to give them the best opportunities for different educational offerings and opportunities within those buildings. And after you kind of get through it, the initial shock is what you deal with. I think we've been through a lot in Fayette County where we did the mass movements that we did. And once you get through that initial phase, the long-term goals are finally reached and you feel pretty good about where you're at.
So for those that might not have been able to follow or maybe aren't familiar with the transition that Fayette County's gone for their schools and the actual buildings, could you share a little bit about, what it was like and maybe the stage of those buildings before you went through the consolidation, and what the new buildings actually mean to those opportunities?
Well, we had trouble. I mean, we had roofs that were terrible. We had structural problems where there were collapse. We had site problems where water had infiltrated. We were running old coal fire furnaces in those facilities. Soot, where you find it in cafeterias and throughout the building. We're bringing another project this week and still looking at those same issues in one of our buildings. We hope to close those shortly. But the asbestos problems, HVACs, there were no HVACs. Really, you had no air quality. We talk a lot about the pandemic. In some of those buildings, there was window units that you had to keep closed, your windows in the summertime, or you didn't maintain that cool air. And then you ran coal fire furnace in the winter where everything stayed closed. So you didn't have any air movement. It wasn't built in as part of that system. So you were dealing with pretty antiquated facilities. Cafeterias that weren't separate from gymnasiums, so you had to shut down schedules based on those issues. Really not modern STEM labs. It is wonderful now to begin to look at our STEM and STEAM opportunities we have in our schools, to be able to see those at work. I think when we opened that first facility, the one that exists where it's Oak Hill Middle and New River Primary now, and people were able to get in and walk through that building and see what we had to offer our children, band rooms that were up to date, art facilities that were up to date. We just finished remodeling an auditorium where we have performances at, just to be able to see that opportunity. We've added gymnasiums, so we can actually have a couple sets of basketball practices and kids aren't practicing at 9 and 10 o'clock at night, to be able to offer those opportunities, which is great.
You know, Gary, we've talked about facilities, we've talked about the pandemic, consistency. As you look forward in Fayette County, you, like many of your colleagues, deal with the current teacher shortage. I know that we could probably focus on our bus driver shortage, a nursing shortage, in general, a shortage of the workforce. When you look forward in Fayette County, you know, what are the biggest concerns you have that the teacher shortage will put you in?
I think I worry about our teachers. I think they're out there doing a tremendous job for us. We do a lot of 10-minute talks and walkthroughs, and we try to enhance their instructional component with them in the classrooms, and expect a lot of them. At the same time, not to have people to fill in when they're absent, and they worry about those students. That's a big issue. They worry about their children when they're at home, and not to have adequate people to fill in. The other part that concerns me is sometimes we ask them to cover on their planning periods and to do some other things. We really don't want to lose people. I think we're at a critical stage right now. I don't think this is an issue unique to West Virginia. It's not unique to Fayette County. It's a nationwide issue, and just for everybody to be aware of how important those teachers are and how important all of our personnel are. Our bus drivers, when they miss, we've had to cancel a few routes because of issues. You know, our cooks, our aides, our secretaries, custodians, all those people are valuable to the education of the students we have, and we want them to have a comfortable and relaxed atmosphere to operate in, and it's a little bit of a struggle right now. I think we have to keep a positive attitude. You know, we're making some moves in the main office where we're going to be out substituting in some more capacities and be out there just to show them that we're part of that team, because we're all a team or a family. I think one of the reasons I'm in West Virginia is 42 years ago when we moved here, my wife and myself, we came from Western Pennsylvania to West Virginia, and we never turned back. And I think a lot had to do with the fact that this became our family.
You know, Fayette County is just, you know, it's a beautiful location in West Virginia, wonderful community. You've done some wonderful things in the schools, and we have some wonderful schools to showcase in Fayette County. Could you tell us, you know, to kind of wrap up, where do you see the next several years of Fayette County going? What can we expect out of Fayette County?
Of course, we want to finish our facility plans. We've got, hopefully, have a new facility to replace Anstead Elementary and Divide Elementary. I think we want to continue to work on what we're working in the educational system to really give it the highest quality of instruction, the engagement, using our data to pull our students in and intervene, create our students when they're graduates to have every opportunity possible for them, whether it be vocational or military or colleges. We want that post-secondary opportunities there for our students. So that's kind of my dream, to get us to that point. And then to look at even all of our extracurricular facilities at some point. We've got to do some work on those. Those are issues that are really important.
You know, Gary, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You know, you're one of 55 leaders that run our school districts in the state of West Virginia, and you absolutely represent, you know, that saying we've been using throughout the pandemic, that one caring adult. And if there's one thing I think the community needs to realize, it's just how committed you are to not only Fayette County, but West Virginia education. And you know, on behalf of the West Virginia Board of Education, the Department of Education, we thank you for not only your service, but your leadership in Fayette County and across the state.
Well, I thank you for having me here today, but I really thank West Virginia for giving me the opportunity to be here and be a part of the environment that I work with every day.
Thank you, Gary.